Hey, this is Benjamin, and I just got back from Seattle, Washington, where I went and witnessed one leg of the Jordan Peterson 12 Rules for Life tour, in which he admitted to smoking pot since he was 12 and only got through rule number 7, I think, which is pursue that which is meaningful over that which is expedient. It was a fairly good talk. I do want to say, however, that I think I figured out what I want. Somebody to rise up from the ranks of the witnesses of Jordan Peterson and not be an adorer or a detractor, but a very good student. That's what he needs. He needs a very good student to question him in the right way, to approach him as a learner, and to not guide him or criticize him, but ask for him to open up more upon that which he speaks. And this guy gave a about 92-minute talk, just freewheeling talk. This guy is at the peak of the rhetorical game. And that's kind of ironic that I messed up saying that sentence. I'll leave that in just for shits and giggles. He's at the peak of his game, rhetorically. I don't know if there's anybody else. I'm sure that there are people who could match him in relating to the crowd at that depth and that length of time, but still... and this is no fault of his own. It's just the format of speaking on your own without direct feedback, specifically words. Now, towards the beginning of his talk, he said that this isn't a lecture. This is a discussion, and the other side of it's nonverbal. Not entirely nonverbal. There was at least one person who had either drank a lot or has some sort of disinhibited frontal cortex who spoke quite a bit through the whole thing. But there was laughter, and there was responses, verbal and nonverbal responses, but there was no pointed questions and no ask for clarifications. And if the video ever surfaces, I might end up going through it and responding to it as though it were another side of a discussion, like a long-distance chess game. I read a lot of the criticism that Jordan Peterson gets, and it's very canned, and it's very overwrought, and for some reason, almost every article needs to point out that his fans are young men, which is kind of just a disturbing pattern that all these articles need to point out. Like, what's inherently wrong about speaking to young men? Like, that's kind of weird. But, I get tired of people just like trying to trounce him and trying to denounce him, but doing it so horribly and slipshoddily that they actually invoke more of a positive for him than a negative. And I don't in any way want a negative. I want a net positive for Jordan Peterson. I don't think praise. I don't think what Dave Rubin, who introduced and then kind of participated in a Q&A. I don't think Dave Rubin necessarily is the correct counter to have Jordan Peterson on stage, and that just might be my own envy of that position speaking. But since I haven't posted anything in maybe 3 days, possibly 2, I really need to post something. So I'm going to give a little breakdown or a response video to this video that I found on the internet that's making its rounds on the internet of a pink-haired or purple-haired Australian feminist saying something about diapers and consent. And I'm going to try to do this really tenderly and gingerly, as though we all have a diaper rash about speaking about babies' genitals, because we certainly do, and it's a very sensitive topic on a number of levels, but it's an important topic. If you're ever going to be a parent, or if you're ever going to find yourself taking care of a young one who does not yet realize that it is their responsibility to control their sphincters, then you are going to run into this situation. So it's something that I think we need to talk about. And I actually do appreciate what this woman attempted to communicate in this very brief little clip. So let me look it up and then we'll watch it. Okay. Just show me the videos. Oh, there we go. 117. Let's see. I'll try to go for the long one. I'm going to cut all this out. I don't know why I'm talking to you right now.
Yeah. How young are some of the children you talk to?
We work from children from 3 years old. We work with parents from birth.
From birth?
Yeah. Yep. Just about how to set up a culture of consent in their homes. So, I'm going to change your nappy now. Is that okay? Of course, the baby's not going to respond, yes, Mum, that's awesome. I'd love to have my nappy changed. But if you leave a space and wait for body language and wait to make eye contact, then you're letting that child know that their response matters.
So, actually, this is pretty simple. I think that consent is not the correct way to frame the interaction between an adult and a baby when the diaper needs to be changed. I think, and I'll bring it back to my original point when I started doing this commentary stuff, it needs to be founded on mutual respect. Well, it needs to be founded on respect, and that respect needs to be couched within recognition. So when you smell the baby, or witness the baby's got some dribbly down their leg, and somehow it always ends up in the shoe. It's really weird how poop can end up in a shoe. I've witnessed this firsthand. But you recognize the problem, and you signal that the solution is forthcoming, and you establish a human contact. Of course, I think that this is pretty damn obvious, that you establish a rapport between you and the child. This is what's going to happen, and it needs to happen. And sometimes you need to be firm, but it's always better to be gentle even when you're being firm. There's a way to surround your firmness with gentility, and you bring them to the station or to the outcropping of the rock, if you're kind of Oedipal in what's going on. And I don't mean that Oedipal in the grown-up Oedipal. I mean putting the baby on the rock. That's what I mean. And that's why this is such a fraught circumstance. But you put the baby down, and you establish connection, eye to eye, face to face, and you recognize the child, but you need to recognize also that the problem is there and that there's a solution. And in that, over many repetitions, you can eventually kind of put a little bit more pressure on the child that it is their responsibility. Now, I'm not going to get into all the different techniques of potty training. There are a wide variety. It all comes down to persistence and recognition that it's the child's responsibility to control that part of them. Those two parts, the urethra and the, what do we call it, the butt, are very personal, outgoing, release valves, just as the mouth is the outgoing release valve of, eventually the human being or the cultured being, the worded being. And it's the child's responsibility to control their mouth and how they use that, whether it's biting or not biting a friend, or screaming or not screaming, or whining or disarticulating the solution or the problem, disarticulating the problem that they need to find help to get a solution for, or whatever else language is good for. But the child's body is sacrosanct. And yet, at the same time, that child needs to be weaned into self-responsibility. And how I firmly believe, one weans a child into self-responsibility is by recognizing the self as central. And that recognition of the self, it's a very natural thing. It just happens with basic, eye-to-eye contact and a certain tone of voice and a certain responsiveness. And I think wit counts a lot too. So, people are railing against this purple pink-haired feminist for saying that babies need to have some sort of consent in that operation. And yeah, consent is a way to put it, and unfortunately current talking point feminism uses consent in some pretty disturbing ways. Should we even bring that up? No, I do think that perhaps consent is a good way to think about it. When you're interacting with somebody's body and you're taking care of their body, whether it's helping them with a problem with their body or in an adult relationship, let's make that clear, of course, pleasing that body with your body, there needs to be all couched not in necessarily consent so much as recognition. And that recognition will show if there's a grounding of respect, a grounding where consent can be shuffled between two people, whether that be on the infant level or on the adult level. But on the infant level, it's not a vocal consent. It's not yet an articulated consent, of course. So I think that she's onto something. I think she could have maybe phrased it a different way. I think people need to relax a little bit when it comes to I don't know. There's a problem. There's a big problem with over matriarchal ideations within child development. But I think that motherhood and the female are intricately linked on a very, very deep level, and that the wisdom of the female will manifest itself in the relationship between the woman and the child. Not to say that a man can't do that, but there's something essential in womanhood that prepares one for doing that. Now, I'm not going to say that that's for everybody. Of course, I'm not going to enter into that conversation. I'm just saying that we can be more respectful towards one another when we're offering each other advice on how to interact with each other, right? And, and when we also argue and suss apart those ideas on how we should interact with each other. I think the debate, the dialogue, the dialectic is wide open, but that all needs to be grounded in recognition and respect and, of course, a little bit of wit. Wit never hurts. Well.